Thank you, Laura. And thank you, everybody, for coming, taking time out of your afternoon to actually go to a talk as opposed to, I don't know, go home and take a nap, which is what I would prefer to do. I don't know about you. So today my talk is about predicting behavior from people's personality, but also predicting personality from people's behavior. So as I was trying to think of how do I make the talk interesting, because there can be some boringness to this, just a little bit. One of the things I thought of is, well, I'll do some sort of catchy title. So I was looking around my house and I said, damn, I have a lot of shoes. There you go. So today we're going to be talking about how the things that we own can actually indicate our personality, and also how our personality, we can kind of predict what people own and what sorts of things they use in their environment or have in their environment from their personality. So first thing I want to ask you is, okay, who's got a collection of shoes? Raise your hand. How many people have at least 10 pairs? 20 pairs? 30 pairs? Okay, Imelda Marcos over there, right? So social psychologists would tell us that the reason why we have all of these shoes is because we know that all of our different jobs, all of our different roles, all the different places that we may go require us to, dress differently. Whereas personality psychologists would tell us that they may represent enduring traits. So each type of shoe that we have, or the types or the colors of shoes, if they're all black or they're all brown or something like that, can indicate something about our personality, as opposed to just saying, well, the person obviously just likes brown shoes. So, hello, there we go. Quick introduction about me. I am an assistant professor of psychology at Northwest Vista. I've been here since 2008. My research focuses on identity development, so pretty much how do people become the people that they think of themselves as? How does a person start to think of themselves as a psychologist, or as a student, or as an environmentalist, which is one of my most recent research studies. And I do have more than 20 pairs of shoes. So what is that going to say about me? We'll talk about that in a minute. If you want to learn more about personality, you can take my personality psychology class. I'm the only person that teaches this class, so if you're interested in personality, you are stuck with me. And right now, I only teach it online, and there's a reason for that. If I offered it both face-to-face and online, only the online fills up, and then there's like 5 students left in the face-to-face class, and it gets canceled. So I only offer it online. Now, if I could be maybe convinced that it would fill up next semester, that we would offer 2 sections, we could talk about that. But as of right now, it's only offered online. How many people here are in the online personality class right now? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So in that class, we talk about personality theories, personality theorists. So what did Freud say about how your personality developed? What did Jung say about how your personality developed? Karen Horney, what did she say about it? Those are the types of things that we talk about in that class. We will also talk about this specific stuff here, which is where we talk about trait theory. So some theorists are going to tell you that what we should be focusing on when we look at personality research are traits, characteristics that people have. So the question then becomes, what is personality? And for the most part, I tell students, good luck defining personality. If you're in the personality class the first week, we spent kind of looking at the different definitions, the textbook's definition versus some online sites' definitions. And there were some consistencies between the definitions, but there were also some differences. And what we see is that personality theorists are very similar to the theory they come up with. And so the idea, the definition that a personality theorist has of personality is similar to themselves, which means we've got thousands of personality theorists, and we've got thousands of personality definitions, right? So let's agree upon a definition just for fun. According to the text that I use currently, it is a global concept referring to a relatively permanent pattern of traits, dispositions, characteristics that give some degree of consistency to a person's behavior. What? What does that mean? So let's break it down a little bit. Relatively permanent. One of the first things we need to know about personality is that it does not change day to day. And so if a student tells me, well, my personality is like this today, but this tomorrow, really what you're talking about is the fact that social influences, where you are, who you're with, what roles you're playing at the time, are going to impact your behavior. So it's not that your personality changes, it's that your behavior changes due to the environmental influences. Make sense so far? Okay? So our traits, who we are, how we think of ourselves, are going to stay the same. They're going to be relatively permanent throughout the lifespan. We do know that as we get older, our traits seem to soften a little bit. People maybe aren't so negative. People maybe aren't so interested in starting a fight with you as opposed to being, a positive, upbeat person. So we do soften a little bit as we age, but generally that's really the only consistent personality change that we see with aging. We also see that personality changes typically due to trauma. So if a person experiences a traumatic event, don't expect them to be the same person the next time you see them, because trauma can impact how we think of ourselves, how we think of the world, whether we think of the world as a safe or scary place, all of those sorts of things. Right? So the traits are going to be relatively permanent, but then again, there are some things that can impact what's going on with us. They're a pattern, and what we mean by that is you're going to see that people behave consistently. So don't just watch a person's behavior once and assume that you know how they are, because that doesn't demonstrate a pattern, it doesn't demonstrate consistency. So, my man, what's your name?
Caesar.
Caesar was late. Is Caesar a late person? No. Maybe. Maybe. Caesar would know. Or Caesar might not know. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But does the fact that he showed up late to my lecture mean that he is a late person? No. Okay? So when we're trying to understand or figure out a person's personality, patterns and consistency are going to be really important. So if you see someone behaving out of pattern in a way that is kind of abnormal for you, then you can start to wonder, okay, what is causing that behavior? Most likely it's the social situation that the person's in that's impacting that behavior, that it's inconsistent with their typical pattern. Make sense so far? Yes? No? Okay, no. Thanks. So we're going to be looking at traits, dispositions, and characteristics. So a trait is a typical way that a person behaves. So, for example, if you're optimistic, that would be a trait. If you're pessimistic, that would be a trait. If you're generally upbeat, that would be a trait. If you're generally fake, that would be a trait as well, right? So dispositions are ways that we kind of lean towards. So I lean towards behaving in a certain manner. And then characteristics and traits are very similar in terms of their definitions. So again, we want consistency when we're trying to understand people's personality. And then the other thing that we know from this definition is that behavior is going to be influenced by personality. So what's going on up here, what consistently goes on up here, what cognitions consistently go on up here, is going to influence how this thing behaves. And obviously, again, we're looking at consistent patterns of behavior that should be indicating the person's personality. You with me so far? All right. So there's multiple personality theories. And again, if you take the personality psychology class, you're going to learn about a lot of them. One of the kind of reigning theories right now is the Big Five Factors, or the BFF, not your best friend forever. And the Big Five Factors theory states that there are 5 factors that are kind of overarching factors that can explain all personalities. So let's talk quickly about a little bit of history relating to personality theory and trait theories. Initially, the Allports did some listing of traits. They quite literally went through the dictionary and pulled out everything that you could be, all of the traits, and made a list of them. There were thousands. And then they made a questionnaire that tried to assess you on these traits. Can you imagine a questionnaire assessing over 1,000 traits? I'd like you to take a 2 or 3 hour long research survey? No, right? So a lot of people started saying, okay, how can we figure out, there's got to be some kind of overarching categories that you can put at least, 20 or so traits underneath, and then we can, make another category and put those 20 traits underneath there. So we got to organize it somehow. Otherwise, it's just this big list of alphabetical, because we pulled them from the dictionary, names that are lists of people, how people can behave, and that's not really useful to anybody. So in the 1970s and 1980s, McCrae and Costa started doing some research using what we call factor analysis. This is the idea that using statistics, we can figure out how similar certain groups of traits are. And so using factor analysis, they created initially 3 factors. And then they finally, in the late 1980s, decided, actually, okay, we'll throw on 2 more. So initially, they created a questionnaire called the NEO-PI. So neuroticism, extraversion, and openness to new experiences, personality inventory. And then they added the other 2 traits, which created the 5 factors. Now, obviously, there's going to be multiple people in the world who will say, it doesn't explain everything. And we've gotten to a point in psychological history where we don't try to make these huge grand theories that explain anything anymore, because they're just too bulky and they're too hard to assess. Can you imagine if you've studied Freud's theory and how huge it was? Can you imagine trying to design one research study that would assess that entire theory? If you're in personality theories, it's an entire chapter. No, I couldn't, okay? So what, as researchers, we've really started to do is instead focus on one specific thing that we can create a research study on and gather our data and then put it out to the world and say, okay, if you're creating a textbook on personality psychology, here's a piece of the puzzle. And that's literally what we've started calling your personality is a puzzle. There's actually a research textbook called The Pieces of the Personality Puzzle. Makes sense, right? So a lot of researchers say, well, this 5 factors thing, it doesn't take into account people's attachment behaviors or how they behave with their significant other. It doesn't take into account other specific things. And they're right. It totally doesn't. It is not a panacea that's going to make us understand everybody's behavior. But what it is capable of doing is organizing some of the knowledge that we currently have about personality. So I'd rather organize some of it than have all of it just kind of hanging out there, right? So they've got these 5 factors, and each factor is on a continuum. So what that means is that each person in this room fits somewhere on the extraversion continuum. So if we say that being completely extroverted, liking to talk to people, enjoying large groups, enjoying being the center of attention is over here, then introversion is going to be the other side of that continuum. Okay? And most of us are going to fall somewhere in between. So we can take an assessment that will tell us that you are 30% extroverted, which means that you're on the lower level, you're closer to introverted than extroverted. So extraversion neuroticism is our second one. If you know what being neurotic means, then you probably have an idea of what neuroticism means. It basically talks about your level of anxiety. Oh, wait, hold on. Openness, it relates to our interest in trying new things. Some people are, super interested in new stuff. I want to learn everything. I want to go skydiving. I want to go base jumping. I want to try it all. And there's other people who are like, I eat the same thing at Johnny Carino's every Friday night at 5 o'clock. Right? Completely opposite ends of the spectrum. We have agreeableness, which is your level of interest of creating happiness for people. So people who are high on agreeableness, no, that sounds funny, like you're high on agreeableness. But so people who are high in agreeableness, let's put it that way, are more likely to try to placate others, to make other people happy, to diffuse an argument, those sorts of things. Whereas people who are low on agreeableness are not intentionally rude, but these people may intentionally want to start a discussion with you, or another 4-letter word that we like to say. So if you have a coworker who's constantly kind of poking people and playing the devil's advocate, then we could say that they would be low on the agreeableness variable. Make sense? So if you took a personality assessment and it said that you were low in agreeableness, that does not mean that you're rude. That does not mean that you're mean or anything like that. It may just mean that you like to have discussions with people, which doesn't necessarily mean anything bad, right? Now, when you start calling them names, using prejudicial statements, that's where we start to see a problem. And then our last one is conscientiousness. Conscientious people, people who are high in conscientiousness, are more likely to go to lectures in the afternoon for extra credit points. They're more likely to have a schedule book to know exactly where they're going. They're more likely to already have the textbook on the first day of class. I had a student come to me on the first day of class a couple years ago and said, "I've already read your syllabus. I found it online." A. I'll just give you the A. Okay? So conscientious people already know what's coming. They've got it done, and they're looking towards what's the next thing. The opposite end of conscientiousness is the students who maybe forgot about class on the first week, showed up on Wednesday late because they forgot to set their alarm. And we can relate this obviously to goals and motivation, but for some people they're just not conscientious. They would much rather just go with the flow than be on top of everything that they're supposed to be doing. All right? Questions so far? Okay. So I'm going to give you the big five, super quick. This is not a good and completely valid assessment, so don't walk out of here thinking like, I have a horrible personality. Don't do that. But this is really a quick and dirty assessment for how to think of yourself in terms of personality. So all of the people who are high in conscientiousness are going to open their notebook, or maybe they already have it open, right? They're going to figure out on a scale of 1 to 10, on a scale of 1 to 7 with 10 questions, how extroverted and enthusiastic are you? So low is a 1 and 7 is a high. So how many people need paper? So grab some paper from a neighbor if you can. I had a couple extra pens up here. Y'all stole them. Ooh. So let's take about 3 minutes to answer these questions. Where do you see yourself on a scale of 1 to 7 on those 7 questions? Write down your answer, and then I'll tell you how to score it next slide. Who needs a pen? There you go. Laura has a great idea. You do it on your phone, like pull up the Notes app, and then 1, 6, 2, 4. Yeah? Anybody have any questions what a certain word means? Yes. Which one? Quarrelsome. I like to start fights. Or another 4-letter word. How are you doing? How many folks are done? Raise your hand. Okay. Give me another minute or so. Number 1, sure. Extroverted and enthusiastic. So would you say that you are extroverted and enthusiastic? Or would you say that you're in the middle? Or would you say that you're not extroverted and enthusiastic? So strongly disagree is a 1. That's not me. That's kind of me, 3. And then a 7 is, oh my God, that's me. Could I what? You like to be the life of the party, you like to hang out with lots of people, you gather your energy from groups of people, whereas introverts, opposite, gather their energy from staying home by themselves with a book. Okay, so we ready? I give you too much time, you start talking about other things like your weekend and all that sort of stuff. Especially this table over here.
Talk about how great you look on camera.
Oh, well, thank you. Oh, that's fine. Yes, I suppose. Okay, so we ready? One thing I want you to keep in mind, if you are writing all of these down, this is being recorded so that I can actually put it on my YouTube channel. Business cards are right there. You want a copy of it? You want me to link you to the video? Take a business card, send me an email, and I will send you a copy of the link. Okie dokie? All right. So let's score it. I have my mic on, right? Yes. Okay, good. So let's score it. How to figure out your openness score. Take the numeral 8. Subtract your score from number 10. And then add your score on number 5. I see confusion, and that's okay. So, number 10, what'd you get? 3.
3.
Okay, so we're going to go 8 minus 3 is 5, plus, what'd you get on number 5?
5.
So your score on openness is a 10. 5 plus 5 is 10.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So take the number 8, subtract out your score on number 8. And then add your score on item 3. This is always the most difficult part. I was told there was no math. How many people have problems? Okay. Let's see. If we've got our scores, let's take a look at the averages. And if you need me to help you figure out your score once we're done, then I can do that. So the average openness score in the United States using this questionnaire is going to be 10.8 for females and 10.7 for males. Average conscientiousness score is an 11 for chicks, 10.4 for guys. Extraversion, 9.1. Males is 8.5. Agreeableness, females is 10.6, males is 10.1, and then neuroticism, women are more neurotic than men. Did you know that? So women are 6.7, whereas your males are going to be 5.7. So how do you, if you were able to figure out your scores, how did you compare to the average American? Pretty close? No? What was your difference? What was your biggest difference?
Mainly I was higher on some categories.
Okay. Like what?
The consciousness.
Conscientiousness?
I had a 12.
Oh, Lord.
Me too. And,
Well, that's good. I want you in my classes.
and agreeableness, I got a 14.
Oh, boy. Okay.
On agreeableness, I had a 13.
Okay.
On openness, I had a 5. And extroversion, I had a 4. I didn't get to add the last one. You flipped it before too fast.
We'll go back once we're done. Okay. So if you're over where the average was, that indicates that you're more of that trait than the average person is. If you're under, then you're less of that trait than the average person is. So what does that mean? If I'm high in something, what does that mean? Let's talk quick about that. So if you're high in extroversion, usually you are more affectionate, you're a joiner, you like to join groups of people, you like to do stuff with people, not necessarily being the person that makes the decisions, but hey, I want to hang out with y'all. You're talkative, fun-loving, active, and passionate. People who are low in extroversion are going to be reserved, so they stick to themselves. They're not likely to shout out in the middle of class. They're a loner. They spend more time by themselves than they do with a group. They're quiet. They're sober, not meaning they don't drink alcohol, meaning that they are less likely to laugh at silly jokes. Let's put it that way. So they're more passive, whatever makes you happy. And some people perceive them as unfeeling. Most introverts are going to be, so a person low in extroversion is going to be an introvert. Most introverts do feel things, but they're just not as likely to tell you about it. Okay? Let's move on to neuroticism, the anxiety people. If you're high in neuroticism, that means you're anxious. Makes sense, right? Temperamental, self-pitying, self-conscious, so you're constantly wondering, do I have something in my teeth? Is everybody looking at me? You're emotional, so your emotions can go all over the place, and you feel vulnerable. Whereas people who are low in neuroticism, they're calm, they're even-tempered, they're self-satisfied, they don't feel the need to try to make themselves better, they're happy where they're at. They feel comfortable, they make other people feel comfortable, whereas people who are high in neuroticism make other people feel anxious. Like you sit next to that person and you're like, you make me anxious. People who are low in neuroticism seem unemotional, but again, they've still got it going on up here, they're just not emoting it. They're not showing it to everybody. And hardy. So people who are low in neuroticism, if they experience a trauma, they're likely to bounce back from it more quickly than a person who is high in neuroticism. Make sense so far? Okay. Openness. Openness to new experiences. People who are high here, still sounds funny, are imaginative. They're creative. They come up with original ideas. They prefer variety as opposed to say the same. They're curious, and they're more likely to be liberal in terms of their politics, not in terms of how much butter they use. In terms of low levels of openness, they're down to earth. I'm going to say this and people are going to get offended and don't get offended. It's not that you're not creative. We'll talk about this in a second. They're uncreative. They're conventional. They prefer routine as opposed to lots of new stuff. They're uncurious and they're conservative. So if that's you, if you are on the low end of openness to new experiences, what that means is that you've liked the stuff that you've got. You don't feel the need to investigate something new. You think that the way that you do things works and it works well. There's no reason to change it. And that's why to others you may seem conventional and uncurious. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm not saying anything bad about you. Don't go slash my tires. Now, people who are low in openness wouldn't do that. So let's talk about agreeableness. People who are high in agreeableness, they're soft-hearted. They feel bad for the puppies. They're trusting. They're generous. They're acquiescent, which means that if you ask them to do something, generally they'll do it. Find them and ask them for $5. No, I'm joking. They're lenient, especially when they're supposed to be the ones that are implementing rules, so you do not want to be a high in agreeableness like parent. That's not going to help you. Okay? And they are good-natured, which means that everybody perceives them to be happy, positive, helpful, nice. That's how we describe them. They're so nice. But the funny part is, a lot of times nice people do what? Get screwed. Right? Because people perceive them as, oh, well, they won't care. They won't mind if I do that to them. When in fact they do mind up here, they're just not emoting it. They're just not showing it. Right? Now, if we talk about people who are low in agreeableness, they may seem ruthless, suspicious, stingy, antagonistic. They like to start fights, critical of other people. So rather than say nice things, they say like, oh, well, you spelled my name wrong. Thanks for coming to my party, like what? They seem irritable, just cranky pants is how I would describe them, right? But that does not necessarily, if you have a low score on that, does not necessarily mean that you are rude to everybody, things like that. It just means that in a group setting, people may perceive you as like kind of that guy, the downer, the one that kind of makes everybody go, he's just cranky, just ignore him. And last of all, conscientiousness. We can talk about people who are high in conscientiousness are conscientious. They're hardworking. They're well organized. They're punctual. They're on time. They're ambitious. They have lots of goals. They want to reach those goals. And they are persevering, which means I will continue at whatever it is at what cost. All right? Whereas low-level folks, negligent, lazy, disorganized, late, aimless, and quitting. So, questions about how we would describe the different traits? Yeah?
Could you repeat them?
Oh, gosh.
No, the part with the scores.
How about I'll repeat them with part with the scores once we're done? When I'm done with the entire presentation, then we'll go back. And you can finish your scores. Okay? Yeah? Questions about the traits? Questions about the research surrounding the traits? No? Let's start talking about what I think of or I perceive as some fun stuff. Nope, not that way, this way. So let's talk about identity and what we call identity claims. Identity is how I think of myself. So if I made a badge for myself that included my name, which would be part of your identity is your name, right? Or a nickname if you go by a nickname as opposed to your first name. So my first name is Melissa. Part of my identity is that I go by Liz. And if you call me Melissa, then most likely I'll think you're either old or my mother. So we have this list of kind of things in our head that are us, that make us us. So if you were to answer a personals ad, right? That would be your identity, how you would tell other people about yourself. If you listed off 5, 10 things about yourself, this would be how you perceive yourself, your identity. So we make, there we go, what we call identity claims. These are basically things that we have in our environments that claim something about our identity. Now, some parts of our identity we like. Some parts of our identity we don't like. Generally, we don't want to show other people the parts of our identity that we don't like. So if I think I'm not very good at cleaning my house, and that's part of my identity, like I'm a bad housekeeper. And that's part of how I think of myself. I generally won't invite people over to my house because I'm not going to show you my bad traits, right? Whereas if we have stuff that we want people to see, then we're going to put it out there for everyone to see. Does that make sense? So when you see people putting things up in their classrooms, or putting things up on their lockers, or putting things up on their cars, bumper stickers, sending you an email and it has an email signature in it. These are all what we call identity claims. These are things that people are showing to you. See, this is me. This is what I'm like. All right? And there's self-directed identity claims, And then there's other directed identity claims. Self-directed identity claims are things that we put up for ourselves to see. And then other directed identity claims are things we put up for other people to see. So a self-directed identity claim, if you've been in my office, you'll see that there's some stuff that only I can see because, okay, here's my computer, and then it's right here, and then the seat where like a student would sit is right here. So this is where my self-directed identity claims, things I want to remind myself about, would go. Nobody else can really see that. And then the rest of my office, pretty much, because our offices are so open, is where you would have your other directed identity claims. These are the things that you want other people to see and how you want other people to perceive you. Because one of the things that we know about people is we attempt to manage how other people perceive us. Does that make sense? We kind of put on a show, and sometimes we get to the point where we don't care about the show anymore. So if you come to my office, you'll see there's just one part of my desk. So my desk is in the corner. Here's my 2 monitors. Here's my keyboard. There's some stuff over here. There's some stuff over here. And then there's just this long piece right here that just has piles, not so neat piles either, of just junk, what it looks like, okay? And it's, preparation for this lecture, preparation for tomorrow's class, preparation for finishing my dissertation, preparation for all this sort of stuff. And it just looks like chaos. And if someone were to come into my office, they would most likely assume that I am not very conscientious because there is controlled chaos going on in my office. Now, if you knew me, if you talked to me consistently, you would know what all those piles were for, and you would know that because they are in piles, that actually indicates I am conscientious. Hello, right? So other directed identity claims are things that we show other people that we want them to see to assume stuff about us. Yesterday, I was sitting with my office mate, whose name is Adam. He's the chair of biology. And so I said, hey, dude, are you going to come to my presentation tomorrow? And he said, no. And I said, okay, do you want to see what I'm presenting, or do you not care? And he said, sure, go ahead. So I kind of sat and gave him the walkthrough of my presentation. And I love how he thinks, because it's very similar to how I think. Because we got to this slide, and so I started talking about self-directed and other directed identity claims. So he just, the eyes off the monitor, and he just starts going like this. And I'm like, Adam, don't look at my stuff. He said, why? I said, because I know what you're doing. I said, you want to start? I'll look at your stuff. Your stuff is messier than my stuff, all right? So the things that we have, how we present it, what pictures we post on our Facebook page, what pictures we post on our Instagram. If you notice, Instagram is for pictures that are good. You ever notice that? There's no pictures of dirty dishes on Instagram, people, right? So the research has found, and lots of research has been done on personality traits and personality claims, identity claims, and what you post on Facebook. What you post on, it used to be MySpace was cool, but not anymore. So there was some research on MySpace. Nobody really cares about that much anymore. And we haven't really, at least I haven't seen any research on Instagram and Instagram photos yet, but I'm sure we'll get there. And what we see is that people are claiming stuff all over the place. So there's the picture of so-and-so with their favorite quarterback, like, I know this guy. No, you don't. Okay? So we show people stuff that we want them to think about us. So think about it. Have you ever shown someone intentionally something that made you look bad? Like, oh yeah, these are my dirty socks. No, nobody does that, right? So we have other directed claims which we try to manage. We try to tell people, this is the good stuff about me. Ignore the other stuff. This is the good stuff about me. And that brings up a really good question. So you go into somebody's house, you go into somebody's office, you go into somebody's apartment, and you see their stuff. And knowing what you know about personality now, you can kind of look around and say, okay, how clean is it? But then the question becomes, did they clean up just because I'm coming over? Did they know I was coming over? Because if they didn't, that's better, right? Because then they wouldn't have cleaned up. And then you can look at their music collection. You can see, okay, is it alphabetized? That would indicate conscientiousness, right? Or maybe neuroticism. I don't know about that. So you can look around at what do people post in their house? Pictures. Are there no pictures? That's telling as well. And I always feel the need, there's not a lot of pictures at my house. And people will come to my house and they will say, how long have you been here? And I'll say, 3 years. And I'll almost feel the need to explain, I haven't found a good, like what fits with this house. This house has its own feel, and I just haven't found it yet. And I almost feel the need to explain that to people. Like, yes, I know, my walls are naked, and this is why. Which is, to me, as a psychologist who studies this stuff, is really funny. Because I'm like, but I shouldn't feel the need, and I'm trying not to explain this to the person I'm explaining this to. I shouldn't feel the need to explain that to you. Never mind, stop talking. Right? So what you post on your walls is going to be important. A researcher at UT was sharing this woman's office, and she had a seagull hanging from the ceiling. And so he was wondering, okay, what's with the seagull? Did you like the seagull? Are you into the ocean? Was it a gift? Like, why the seagull? Does it mean anything about you? Does it not mean anything about you? And these are the things that we need to look at when we're trying to use this information to understand people's behaviors. Consistency, pattern. Does the chick have seagulls all over the office? If so, then she probably likes them. If not, then it's probably just an outlier, something weird that we probably don't need to worry about in terms of personality. Does that make sense? Right? So look around your environment, especially in an environment where people have a lot of control of what they're doing. So what they're posting, can they paint, etc. Because these can show you traits of their personality. We also have what we call feeling regulators. So let's say that you work in an office and you have a picture that faces you, not other people, of your child, of your grandfather whom you loved, of your, of a rose from your wedding, something like that. These are all going to be what we call feeling regulators, things that you can, like you get stressed out, you look at this, and it helps you to regulate how you feel. Those are going to be self-directed as opposed to other-directed. And you can tell that those are going to be feeling regulators because you ask the person, tell me about this rose in this small wine glass. And they'll say, oh, you can see like oh, it's really important. Oh, it's from this. That would be an example of something that person feels or experiences as a feeling regulator. How am I doing on time? Anybody? Bueller? Okay, thank you. I'm actually doing well. I like that. Come on. There we go. We also, as humans, leave behavioral residue. What that means is, as you go through life, your personality leaves behind traces of you. Sounds like a Alanis Morissette song, doesn't it? Everybody know who Alanis Morissette is? Dating myself. Right. Good job. So we leave behind pieces of our personality. I joke with my husband that I can tell him exactly what he has done from the time he came home from work until I came home just by, I can stand in the foyer of a house and I'll say, okay, there's a mud spot right there, so he's been outside and it went that way, so he came in the front door, came around this way, there's probably more mud spots over here, came in this way to get some sort of chemical for the lawn, got the chemical, walked back around that way, took off his socks outside, because I still see them outside, talk about leaving stuff behind, right? And so you can tell where people have been, what they have done based upon the residue that they leave behind. So you can also tell something about a person's personality by how well do they clean up after themselves? Do they clean up after themselves? Last night my husband was on the phone, he was eating pudding, and he put the pudding cup down with a spoon in it, and like right next to the sink. And I am like the conscientious person when it comes to cleaning the house. And I'm like, and I walk around and I'm like, dude. He's like, I'm not done. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm sorry. Right? So we leave behind all of this stuff, and we may not even realize that we do it. You take your shoes off, you leave them in the living room. What does that indicate about your personality? That you're not really caring where stuff goes. You'll be able to find it later. Are you guys fighting about this in the back? Yeah. I was going to say, they're going to sit there and go, you do this, no, you do that. Yeah. So we leave behind all of this stuff. And again, if you know the other person really well, then you can tell exactly what they've done, where they've been, all that sort of stuff, what they've been doing. If you've got a child, you can say like, okay, you came home, you put your backpack down in the hallway, and then you went and got a snack because I can see how this process goes. So let's go back to talking about our shoes. If someone has a lot of different types of shoes and different colors, where would we put them on the big five? So, openness to new experiences, high or low? Lots of shoes, different colors. High. Why? They're open to new things. They like variety. I would also say that they recognize that if they're trying a new thing, they might need a new foot apparel for this, right? So it's like, oh, I'm going to a cowboy bar. I must need new boots, right? I don't know. I'm not that extroverted, so I don't know. What about conscientiousness? I have too many shoes. High or low conscientiousness? Depends. What do my shoes look like? Right? If I don't take care of my shoes, probably low on the conscientiousness. Whereas if they're all leather and shiny and then they're boxes, high on the conscientiousness, right? You what? Yeah. Extroverted, high or low? Lots of shoes.
High.
Probably high. Again, we go lots of different places, especially if there are lots of different colors. Then you can expect that the person is higher in extroversion because they like to wear color, they like to stand out. Agreeableness. High, lots of shoes. Probably depends on some other factors. That one's not as easy to decide. Neuroticism, lots of shoes, lots of different colors, probably low, right? Because they are more likely to be doing different stuff, as we talked about with the extroversion. And usually we see that higher levels of extroversion indicate lower levels of neuroticism. So we don't usually have someone who likes to talk to people lots who is really anxious. You don't see that very often. Okay? So where else can we learn about people? You can go in their bedrooms and learn about people. Where do they put stuff? Do they make their beds? Now, here's part of the problem with that. If you're married or live with your significant other, whose personality do we take from the joined bedroom? Depends. Some women care, some women don't. And I always think of my stuff in terms of how other people would perceive it. So we have this really nice black and white comforter that my husband bought. He chose it. It's got holes in it because his toenails cut, okay, yep. And I just left it there because he picked it. He bought it with his own money as a present for me. I'm not going to get rid of it because it's got holes in it that he cut with his toenails. But so people would come in and they'd see this comforter and say, like, oh, that's really nice. Liz must be girly. Hey, Michael bought that. That's not mine, right? That wasn't my choice in terms of what I'm going to put up in our room. So shared spaces can be difficult because you want to almost like sit and grill the two people and be like, okay, whose is that? And then whose is that? Oh, okay, I see how this works now. Right? Offices, again, if you have a shared office space, you want to keep in mind that the people are sharing an office space. If you come into mine and Adam's office, you will see that our personalities are so similar, it's like disturbing. I'm like, did you do a personality test and then put the two of us together because we are so similar? Both sides of the office look exactly the same, disaster area, and then at the end of the semester, they're all like pristine because you're so crazy with all the stuff that's going on, and you're like, okay, grades are passed in. Oh my God, this place is a disaster. I must clean, right? And we both do it. He's even got sanitizer wipes in his desk. So it's really interesting to think about, okay, if you've got two people that share an office space, how's that going to work in terms of whose behavioral residue gets left where? Make sense? Okay. Bathrooms. Again, an individual, one person's bathroom, what's going on there? And remember, we don't want cleaned bathrooms. We want to see no cleaned bathroom. So is it clean? Do you generally keep it clean? Is it a disaster area? Is there makeup all over the place? Is it organized? Are there shelves with buckets and that roll and all that sort of stuff? Or is it like chaos? You open the door and like everything just falls out? How does that work? Okay. CD collections, we already talked about that a little bit. And this is kind of dating ourselves. Most people, well, I don't know. How many people still buy CDs? Raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Okay, most of us buy MP3s off of iTunes, right? So you could look at people's listening lists on iTunes, the 25 most listened to songs, to see how they relate to their personality, things like that. But when we had CD collections, you could look at how were their CDs kept. Are they clean? Are they scratched? Now, if the person has children, don't take the scratched as meaning that they're not conscientious, because, yeah, hi. 2 kids, everything's scratched, everything has fingerprints all over it. Like, you can't watch a movie without it going, And Silas says, the movie stopped. I'm like, that's because you touched it. So you have to take into account the environmental factors that are going to influence what you're observing. So does the person have kids? Do they live with somebody else, etc.? So is their CD collection alphabetized? Is it by color? Is it by type of music? What types of music do they have the most of? Those can all influence or be influenced by our personality. Email signatures. Always fun. Some people don't have one, which is also interesting because that's a choice. Then again, having one is a choice as well, right? When I first started here, I had been teaching previously at another school, came here, did not have an email signature at my last school because I just didn't. I mean, I think I just wrote like Liz at the bottom, didn't I? Yeah. And then I came here. Michelle was one of my students at my old school who's now finishing her master's degree, people. Yay, good job. That's right. So when I came here, I got an email from the chair of our department whose name is Don, and Don had this elaborate signature, and it said, you know, Don Lucas, chair of the psychology department, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, so that's what you do here. You have some sort of something at the bottom of your email, and now I have to figure out how to do that. So I go into Outlook and figure out how to do my signature, and then I started seeing that the other faculty members had like these quotes in their email signature. I'm like, oh, for crying out loud. So now I have to figure out what quote I want to put in my email signature. So I found one that I thought was cool and put it in my email signature. And then I started reading about Sam Gosling's research, he's at UT, on how email signatures can be indicators of personality. I'm just like, oh, damn it. What does it say about me and do I need to change it, right? Actually, mine I really like still, even though it's been there since 2008. It's about creativity and promoting creativity, which we all like that. So we can look at people's pets. Who do they choose as a pet? Which always reminds me of the scene in Lilo and Stitch where she goes back and tries to find the pet at the dog pound, and she chooses like the weirdest one there because she feels like the weirdest child there, right? So a lot of times we choose our pets based upon how we project onto them. So if I think that I'm like a Labrador Retriever, then I want to go get a Labrador Retriever. I'm excited. I like the water. I like to swim, right? So it really depends on how your personality is, and that can be reflected in your animal. And we see a lot of times when people's personalities don't match their animals that they're just kind of like, yeah, it's a dog, whatever. Whereas if the personality really matches with the animal, really meshes with the animal, then people develop this emotional bond to them. And they get really upset when something happens to their animal, when their animal dies. Whereas some people, you notice they really don't. That's probably why. Okay? And then they're garbage. Creepy, but at the same time, totally makes sense. What is garbage? Garbage is the end of our behavioral residue, right? And we think it's private because we put it in a bag and we put it out to the curb, and then someone comes and picks it up, and we assume that they don't open our bag, so we assume it's private. So going through someone's garbage can be very telling in terms of learning about their personality, what sorts of things are going on in their lives. To the point where there's actually a research study called the Garbage Project that studies people's personality, how it relates to their garbage. Yeah. Okay, so what now? You can spend the rest of your days going forth and observing people, looking at their space, looking at their office, looking at their house, and seeing how does their stuff relate to their personality, their shoe collection or lack thereof. How does that relate to their personality? I was talking to a colleague of mine yesterday, and she said, my husband owns 30 pairs of jeans. What does that mean about him? And I said, geez. Well, he enjoys wearing jeans, first of all. But it can mean that the person, if they have different jeans for different events, that means that they go to lots of events, that they feel like jeans are dressy, which I've met her husband, he does. But he does dress them up really well. So if you're dressed up often, wearing jeans, it's kind of like, hey, no, I'm really I'm chill, I'm laid back, look, I'm wearing jeans. With nice dress shoes, hello, right? So that can be an indicator as well. If you look at their shoes, their shoe collection is mostly nice dress shoes, but they've got nice dressy jeans, then that's probably what we're looking at. Whereas if they've got, crappy sandals, then we're probably looking at some 21-year-old guy who hasn't moved up in the clothing department. I'm not looking at your shoes, Bantam. So So we want to make sure that nobody sees our stuff after this, right? Because you're probably thinking, oh, Lord, what does my thing say about me? What does my house, what does my car say about me? My bumper stickers, my email signature. If other people knew what we talked about today, the world would be over, right? But they don't, so you can feel slightly better about that. Most people don't know about this stuff, and they don't recognize that we can use this stuff to understand people's personalities or predict their personalities. So another thing that you can do is you can go read Sam Gosling's book, Snoop. It's right here. It's one of my favorite books, as you can tell. And Sam's at UT, and all of the research in here, or most of the research in here was done by him, and much of the research we've talked about today was done by him. And he really looks at what we call non-obtrusive measures of personality. So not a personality test, but looking at your shoe collection to decide what's going on with your personality, right? And if you're interested in a four-year university and you can move, man, go to UT. You want to work with Sam Gosling and all of these famous people. David Buss is at UT. Like, I want to go to UT. Not really. I want to stay here. But you know what I'm saying. And then if you're really interested, come take my class next semester. Psych 2316 is personality psychology. So those are my references from today. Does anybody have any questions? I've covered everything. Yes, ma'am.
It's like probably not part of it. But what is like the multiple personalities?
Is you want to click the stop button?